Greetings Adventurers, this is Lauren, your Guild Advisor, back with a spoiler talk, spoiler discussion video on Danmachi Sword Oratoria Volume 11. And if you haven't read this novel yet and for some reason you clicked on this video, go away! This is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion on everything that happens in Volume 11. Probably not going to be as long as my 40-minute long video on Volume 14 of the main series, but we'll see how long it gets to. But if you want to see my general review of Volume 11, that video is up there. But let's get down into the spoiler talk. Now, a lot of things in this volume happen in just a short amount of time. It's only about 210 pages long in English, and it just goes by super fast, especially towards the latter half of the volume. And like I voiced in my general review, it's like, unfortunately, only get into Gnosis like by the halfway point, which is like page 100, and then it's only about 100 pages of like the invasion of Gnosis, which is kind of disappointing to me because I liked the long stretches of time we had with Volume 14. Like, we get one whole party's perspective for like the first chunk of the novel, and then on the second 2/3 of Volume 14 of the main series, we got a huge long perspective on Bell and Ryu. But here we're just switching around back and forth super fast. But that is the kind of novel this one is, because it is an invasion rather than like the eerie suspense that was Volume 14 in the main series. And if you guys haven't noticed, I will be talking lightly on some stuff in the main series. I don't know why you would be reading all the way to Sword Oratoria Volume 11 without catching up to the main series first, because in my opinion the main series is just more enjoyable to get through. But I do like Sword Oratoria as well, but I would question you guys if you are all the way through Sword Oratoria and not through the main series, so just warning on that. But close to the beginning of this novel, we get to see a bit into Aiz's perspective. Like, she's still conflicted about the situation with the Xenos. Like, she tells herself she failed to fulfill her promise of killing monsters when she hesitated on Wine, the Vovri, I never understand how to pronounce it, Dragon Girl that Bell is protecting, who protected Bell in turn. And that's when Aiz hesitates, sees herself in Wine, and then says she can't turn her blade on her because Wine's so adamant about protecting Bell, like a monster protecting a human. And like I said before, I really appreciate it when Omori sensei takes the time to just slowly develop his characters, explore them a bit, and that's why I really like the first half of this novel, as it's this build up to the invasion of Gnosis. We get to see how the Loki family members resolve to actually work with the Xenos. Not all of them trust them, of course, but they are making strides to accepting that the Xenos will be part of the operation, even though they won't be directly with each other inside Gnosis. But back to Aiz and her conflict, I really enjoyed this part of the novel. Like, she goes and talks to Bell. We got to see that in the end of Volume 11 in the main series. And you can really see that Aiz, like, looks at Bell, and even after all that turmoil Bell went through, he's still striving to become stronger. Like, he's mad at himself that he lost against Asterios, and he wants to become stronger. He asks Aiz to train him again at some point. And Aiz sees that and says, I also need to become stronger. I need resolve like Bell, because before I know it, he might just be walking ahead of me, running ahead of me. Because right now, Bell kind of knows what he wants to do, and right now, I'm lost. So what does Aiz do? She kind of takes that same feeling that Bell has, like, I want to train more, I need to become stronger, and Aiz does that very same thing, like, I need to become stronger, I need to train with someone. And this is one of my favorite parts to this novel. Like, this is something I was not expecting, but she actually goes to Freya Familia and asks Ottar, the strongest Avenger of Arario, the only known level 7 in Arario. There is one other level 7 guy, apparently, but he's not in Arario, and at some point we'll get to him in the series. Omori sensei, when's that gonna happen? But Ottar, and Freya's like, alright, sure. I'm like, no way, no way. Ottar is training Aiz, and we get to see some fun banter between Alan and Aiz. Alan always being angry, like, what the heck, are you serious? And Ottar was like, Alan, you're helping too. And then Alan's like, yeah, no way. But that was fun, little banter there. And I always think this, like, Ottar is intimidating. He's the strongest adventurer in Orario, but he has like this soft side. He has this respect for people that want to become stronger, and he sees that in Aiz, and he says like, I can't help you too much, but that's really what he's doing. Like, he's telling Aiz like, you have this skill. Like, he doesn't exactly know about her Avenger skill that lets her like completely destroy monsters at the cost of possibly harming her own weapons. But because she viewed Ravis as human, she wasn't able to take advantage of that power. And Ottar like says, there's like a dark flame in you, but don't fear it, don't run from it, control it, control that rage. No Star Wars here. Control that black flame. Use that Avenger skill. Use this power you have against monsters, because Ottar notes the fact that Aiz isn't really meant for like person-to-person fighting. Her specialty is in combating monsters, and he admits that she's probably the best person in Orario at solely fighting against monsters, and that's quite the compliment from the strongest adventurer in Orario. And I have seen Otar's stats, because they are in the back of this nice book called Episode Freya, Familiar Chronicle, and this is not translated yet. It came out in Japan in December, and I can't wait to actually read it. And the thing that happened in this novel in Sword Oratoria made me curious on when this takes place, because I didn't look up when Episode Freya is supposed to take place, but looking through the pictures, she's like cloaked and going somewhere, and here in this novel she's cloaked and going somewhere. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the same time period, but it is interesting. But like I said, I've seen the stats on the back of Freya, Episode Freya, and Taro's stats are pretty crazy. So for him to say that Aiz is the best at combating monsters is quite the compliment. And he gives her that spark, like, I can use this power, like not as like revenge, not because of what happened to my family, but use this power, like channel it in a positive way. Use that power to protect her familia, protect Orario. And after that, she gets her status updated like after a week, and she gets over like 250 skill or status points, and Loki remarked that that's pretty impressive. Like, we've seen Bell have crazy gains, and this is probably a really crazy gain as well, especially for someone that is level 6, and this was about a week. But I don't think she's going to be able to train with Ottar anymore, so she has to go back to the regular rate of training that everyone else has to deal with. And we get some developments between Loki and Dionysus. Like, we see Dionysus and Philvis at the graveyard. They're lamenting the loss of their fallen members, and Dio asks for Loki to have him actually go down with her into Gnosis during the invasion. And we get some interesting background on Dionysus himself when Hestia makes her cameo appearance. And regarding Hestia, I think her best scenes come through when she's not like around Bell, because that way we can focus on like Hestia's good qualities, like her observance, her drive to help protect her familia, help grow it, help nurture it. And here you get to see Hestia spill some background on Dionysus himself, like, oh, I know Dio, I actually gave him my seat at like the 12 gods on Mount Olympus, and Dio was kind of problematic. It was a problematic person up there in Olympus. Like, he was always fighting against Tyrannos, and that was like throwing some quick suspicion on Dio and who he really was, like what are his intentions, because later on in the novel, of course, there is some question of who Dio is, and there's like some weird imagery going on, but by the end of the novel, we're like, I think Dio was a good person. But we'll get to that later, but let's get into the start of the invasion itself. Like I said before, we skip around through so many events, so many characters. Like, it's very weird how the invasion starts at like halfway through the novel, and the novel being so short, being around 200 pages, and we get like this cute little scene between Lena and Bet, and it's like, oh, this is gonna be like some epic story, and it's over in like 100 pages after. So it's kind of funny about that. And into the invasion itself, we split into many different parts, many groups, and there's like 2 stages of attack. The first one is find the map, find the ringleaders, and in the second wave would be to eradicate everyone in Gnosis and clear out the evils. And also, they need to find the demi-spirit that they're trying to prepare to destroy Orario with. And if the evils do happen to use that here, then they kind of win. If they use the demi-spirit preemptively, then Lucky Familia kind of wins because they can't use it against Orario later on for their plan to destroy it. So Finn has many goals happening in this invasion, and he's starting to chase ideals now, being inspired by Bell's actions. Like, I'm not just going to settle for, of course we'll lose some people. No, I'm going to plan it so we don't lose anybody. And of course it doesn't, oh man, it does not go that way, but it's cool to see Finn being inspired. Like, volume 10 was like Finn's volume, and then here in volume 11 we get to see him continue to grow from those feelings of resolution that he got in volume 10 here. But man, it does not go the way he wants in this volume. But we do get to see some cool, awesome character moments. Two characters in particular, and both of their names start with A, and I'm not talking about Aiz this time. I'm talking about Osfi and Amid. And Osfi has a badass line here when we see Barca. I think that he's level 4, which is very interesting that he actually got to level 4 under Thanatos. But he's trying to, of course, collapse Gnosis, which kind of pains him. Like, my brother made this mechanic, and I'm going to have to use it to, quote-unquote, save Gnosis. And Osfi stops him in time, and he's like, how is this possible? Even if you guys were able to sneak into here with your invisibility, there's, like, no way that you guys have enough dataless keys for you guys to have one, too. And then Osfi's like, I made one. Like, for some reason, I got some chills when I heard that. I'm like, dang. Like, we have all these cool badass characters like Aiz, Ryu, Ottar, and then Osfi is a badass on her own, but not because of like her combat prowess, but because of her Enigma ability and like being the best item maker in Orario. And this is just one of those ways of her to shine. Like, we see her take flight with her Talaria, her flight boots. We see her make invisible items with the Hades helm, and now she's making like unique keys that were made from people's eyeballs. It's just crazy. And then of course the other A name, Amid. Omori Sensei was really excited about this in the afterword. Like, he got to give Amid some time to shine. He said Amid was his favorite character design in Sword Oratoria that Haimura Sensei made, and he really gave Amid an awesome role in this fight against Barca, who puts 1 billion curses on himself when he knows he can't get out, that he's probably lost. And in his like, he also develops Barca quite a bit here. Like, Barca has been a slave to this curse this entire time, making Gnosis, and he's about to lose everything. So he finally makes like a decision for himself, not just based on building Gnosis, but like, I want revenge. And he puts all these curses on him, implants himself with one of those seeds, and becomes that Barca monster. And it's terrifying. Like, if we see that animated, and I'm not sure if that day is ever gonna come, because they put the Sword Oratoria Volume 5 story in the mobile game, and with no sign of Season 2 in sight, so who knows about that. But it's a terrifying monster. Like, it's bleeding all over. Its blood is like spilling on the people, burning them alive. And then Amid's there with her super amazing healing ability, and she starts casting her spell, and she tries to remove the curse itself from Barca. Like, everyone's like, wait, why are you healing the monster? And actually, she's channeling the curse healing component of her spell onto Barca, and you get to see this cool moment that I really, like, almost reminds me of like Harry Potter in the sense, in one of the battles between Voldemort and Harry. It's Amid's healing versus Barca's curse, who will prevail. And of course, Amid does overcome that, and Barca, like, the curse is removed, and there's like some stipulation, like, did Amid just do, like, did Barca just die because the curse was gone, and he was like, well, curse is gone, I'm free to go? Or was that like a damaging thing? But no matter the case, Amid is the reason that they won that fight, and it was a really cool scene to give a character that hasn't had much screen time at all in Sword Oratoria. So again, really appreciate how Omori Sensei uses all his characters, and sometimes characters you don't even think about, in awesome ways that really highlight who they are individually, like with Asfi, like with Amid. And I know I voiced my gripes on like having all these different perspectives and not really spending too much time on them in this volume because there's only 200 pages to work with. And that's one of the things, like one of the parties is Fels and the Xenos, and I really wish we got to see more of that in this volume, more of them doing stuff in this volume, because of the Xenos arc in the main series, I really am more interested in seeing what the Xenos are like without Bell. Like, what are they like alone with each other, doing stuff together? We don't get to see too much of that. One thing I forgot to mention, we got to see a small little cameo with Ryu, like, and Asvi says, like, and here's our reinforcements. So we got Ryu over here, and of course she disappears in the middle of this because it coincides with Volume 13 and 14 of the main series. And I'm very curious in how, and on when Volume 11 is supposed to end, because I think this takes place just like over a day. So by the time Volume 11 ends for Sword Oratoria, I think Volume 14 of the main series is still happening. And it's crazy, like, how all these crazy events are happening all at the same time in the timeline. Like, Volume 13 and 14 are going on while Volume 11 is going on, and there's like calamity all over the place, like the Gnosis invasion, and then we'll get to this later, but Dio returning to heaven, a Familia being massacred, and then on the other side of the main series, people being massacred by the Juggernaut, the Amphisbaenia appearing preemptively. It's nuts. So much stuff is going down at the same time. Like, Omori Sensei's like, okay, the Xenos arc happened, and now it's time to make everyone fall into despair and throw so much danger at them. And that just makes me excited for where we're going to go in the future. Like, what other crazy things are going to happen to the characters in this franchise next. And now let's move on to Dio and Philvis and the stuff that happens with them. So as we're going through Gnosis, Dio like splits off on his own. He thinks he's with Philvis, and there's like this weird passage going on. Like, it almost made you think that Dio like saw a reflection of himself, but I don't think that's the case. But Dio was very much like going crazy. He wasn't in the right mind because he thought Philvis was with him, but Philvis was with Lafia the entire time. And so he's trapped by himself, probably being faced against Enyo. And that's when Thanatos and Loki are talking, and Thanatos realizes that he's been a pawn this entire time, and that pisses him off. But Dio does indeed fall. He dies. He gets sent back to heaven. And the moment that happened, I was like, oh crap. Dionysus just got sent back to heaven. That means everyone in his Familia got their status sealed. And that's not a good thing to happen when the entire Familia is down in Gnosis, where it's like a life or death battle. And of course, my biggest worries were of course confirmed, because the entire Dionysus Familia, Philvis included, got massacred in this volume. That's a lot. That's like the most amount of deaths we have ever seen in DanMachi. And oh my lord. Like, I like the build up to Dio's death, but Philvis's death, like, unfortunately, I had her death spoiled to me. Like, someone, when Volume 11 was released in Japan, like shortly after that, I don't know if this person was like trolling me or was just genuinely curious and didn't realize, because the wiki pages are updated like as soon as people get a summary of the Japanese novel. So what I assume what happened was someone went to Philvis's wiki page, saw that she died, and then they asked me, when did Philvis die? And I'm like, what do you mean Philvis died? Why did you die? Why'd you tell me? So I don't know if my feelings towards Philvis's death are in the right frame of mind, because I knew she was going to die. I'm like, but how is it going to happen? And the way it happens, like, I understand what Philvis is going through, because she realizes that Dio is dead. And then in this blind rage, she charges towards this masked person working with Enyo that we've seen several times before, commanding the plant monsters. And I'm like, don't do this. Is this really the way you're going to die? Just in the blind rage? And that is indeed how she dies. She doesn't get to say like any crazy lines to Lafia. She's not like claps on the ground. It's just boom, sudden, arm off, swallowed by plant, and Philvis is gone. And I think Omori Sensei has this weird fetish for being for having arms chopped off. Like maybe he's seen too much Star Wars, because Bell loses his arm in volume 4 or volume 13, gets it back, of course. And then here Philvis loses her arm. We get to see Lafia freaking out over it in a gorgeous character illustration in the book. But might I say, great art, Haimura Sensei. I'm not sure if I needed to see Philvis's arm though, being separated from her body, but well, we got that. So I like the slow build up to how Dio met his end, because it was like really creepy, like almost horror novel like. But of course, we all know that all of Dionysus Familia pretty much dies. And Loki Familia really has to like deal with the fact that like we have to leave them behind because they're too slow, because they're being chased by this weird green flesh that activated in response to Dio going back up, and then the 6 seeds that are planted erupting, and Gnosis being like transformed from a den of evils into a den of darkness or something along those lines. But that's the other interesting thing to think about, is that like, what is Gnosis filled with now exactly? Because all the evils are gone now. Thanatos is gone. So even if there were evils still left somewhere, their status is gone, because Thanatos committed suicide basically to get revenge on Enyo and give Loki Familia a way out. So like, who is the enemy now? We know about the masked person. We know about Enyo. Who is Enyo? Apparently Dio figured it out at the very end of his life. And that is a question we are presented towards the end of this novel, and something to really speculate about. But as Loki Familia is going back up into Orario, escaping Gnosis, there is one thing I like thought was a bit convenient, but I'm okay with it. But that's when I don't know if this part was necessary, but I think what Omori Sensei was trying to do was just give Loki Familia more reason to like work with the Xenos, and that's what was accomplished here, because Finn is helping Loki get back up. Loki's about to be attacked, and Finn obviously going like, well, I can't have Loki get hurt, because if she goes back to heaven, everyone is dead. So he took it upon himself, like, I might die because of this, but he pushes Loki back up, fights the monster, the flesh going towards Loki, and then Finn's like, well, I guess that's how I go. And then Ray, Siren, goes and saves him. Like, I thought that was a bit convenient, but I'll let it slide, because we know that the Xenos are working with them, and of course the Xenos are also trying to get the heck out of this place as well. So it's not too crazy to think that Ray would be there, especially with her echolocation ability, to find Finn, like find other survivors, people trying to get out of there, and then save them. So it wasn't too convenient, but I did think it was like, well, that's pretty convenient, Finn. Like, you escaped death yet again. And of course we were teased with this fight between Ravis and Aiz. Like, Aiz is training with Otaro, like, I'm gonna fight Ravis with this newfound resolve. And they didn't really fight, and that was another thing that kind of disappointed me. Like, we're building up to this point, but I guess all this stuff is going to be addressed more in volume 12, which is supposed to be, I think, like the real revenge of Loki Familia. Like, we're gonna figure out a way, because all Sword Oratoria has really been about this right here, this enemy, this Enyo. So I don't feel like they're gonna just, I don't think volume 12 is gonna be like some random thing. Like, it's very much going to be, how are we gonna tackle Gnosis now? I'm very curious to see what happens there. And of course, towards the end of this novel, there are questions like, who is Enyo? And then Loki is thinking about it, and then Soma, of all people, again, Omori Sensei, I really appreciate you using all these different characters in unique ways and stuff that makes sense to the character itself. So with Soma, he smells like, is that divine wine? And Loki's like, what are you talking about? And then Loki's like, wait, Dio is a wine drinker. Let's go to Dionysus Familia home, because it's only been like a couple of hours since all this stuff has went down. And then they find the wine cellar, they find the wine, and then Soma says, like, I haven't made wine like this before. Like, this is perfect divine wine. Like, this could make any god drunk. And it's like, crap. Was Dio controlled this entire time? And they find out that it's made from grapes. And then Loki's like, I heard this before somewhere. And, you know, like, we're not sure if this is actually Enyo, but we go back to her saying, like, I've heard about Dio mentioning grapes before somewhere. You know what, guys? I found out where it was. It was here in Volume 1 of Sword Oratoria. This is where the grapes are, and I immediately think grapes, what god could be, goddess could be linked to that, and I automatically think, well, Demeter is the goddess of like the harvest. She's the person that like is in charge like all the farming. And I go here on page 161 of Sword Oratoria Volume 11. What do we see here? Demeter Familia specialized in agriculture, growing a wide range of fruits and vegetables to sell within Orario. Their farms outside the city walls provided most of the ingredients used by bars and restaurants. The grapes used in tonight's wine were grown on your farm, if I'm not mistaken. I am very particular when it comes to grape wine, and this is absolutely superb. Thank you kindly, Dionysus. Demeter, automatically suspicious. And it's really funny, like how we, like, Enyo has to be someone that we really know about, right? Because of all this foreshadowing, like, Enyo is someone, or maybe not Enyo themselves, but someone working with Enyo is someone that we know already. And because of this line in the first volume of Sword Oratoria, all signs kind of point to Demeter right now being very suspect. So wonder how that's going to go down, and maybe it's addressed in Volume 12, maybe later on, who knows? But Demeter, very high on the suspect scale. And she is one of the characters that was illustrated in that like illustration of like a bunch of different goddesses and gods. And I'm like, why is Gyabnu even in here? He's not suspicious. He's the blacksmith. He doesn't have any association with wine. But Demeter, very, very suspicious right now. Omori Sensei is one of the most modest authors I've had the pleasure of reading the afterwards of, because he keeps going like I'm not sure if I'm that great at foreshadowing. Like, I try to implement it, and I think I do pretty well now. And I'm like, Omori Sensei, this is like, foreshadowing is like one of the things I always praise you about. And you're saying you're not that good at it. And the thing that was in Sword Oratoria Volume 1 was a clue for something that happens here in Volume 11. If that's not foreshadowing, I'm not sure what is, unless that was something he just happened to plant in Volume 1 and didn't think about it until like, hey, I can connect that to something here in Volume 11. But who knows? But Omori Sensei, give yourself some more credit. And then later on he says, I think I finally got used to the rhythm of battles. I'm like, Omori Sensei, you had this down. The rhythm of battles, you had that down since Volume 3 of the main series with Bell and the Minotaur fights. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I finally got a hang of it. Like, Omori Sensei, if you think you're like starting to get a hang of these things, I'm very excited to see what quality of writing you have when you say, like, I'm actually proud of this. Like, geez, keep on writing, Omori Sensei, because I'll keep on reading. And the other thing in the afterword, like he mentioned, like he really likes Ami, like he planned like a bunch of backstory for her. He's like, can I include this somewhere to his editor? And the editor's just like, you'll have to do it in the Familia Chronicle. Like, oh boy, I guess we might get a Familia Chronicle episode Amid, maybe? I was really hoping for episode Hermes next after Freya, so we'll see what the next Familia Chronicle is going to be, but I think it was like, it's almost like 2 or 3 years between episode Ryu and Freya of the time of writing between the two, so we'll see if that speeds up anytime soon. But Omori Sensei has his hands full with 3 different series, all within the same franchise that he's writing for. And the last thing I'd like to address before this video gets too long is just, I wonder how Lafia is going to take Philvis's death, because Philvis and Lafia's relationship was one of my favorite parts in Sword Oratoria. Like how I always thought that Hestia wasn't too attractive of a character. She was always like somewhat annoying when it came to Bell whenever they were like in scenes together and other characters tried to interact with Bell. Very much in the same vein as Lafia being somewhat annoying when Aiz is mentioned, and then Bell getting close to Aiz. But whenever Lafia is with Philvis, I think that like just brings out more of her better moments, and it'll be very interesting to see how Lafia develops from this point. Like at the end of this volume, she's super depressed. Elfie tries to cheer her up, but she can't do it, and it ends up making Elfie cry. So they have to get Lafia a different room. So very curious to see how Lafia overcomes this. If she does overcome this, she probably will, but I'm very curious to see how she does. And what newfound resolve she might have. Like, this character death is something that could very much steer Lafia in a very cool direction. We'll just have to see what happens in Volume 12. But anyway, that is a lot of talking points for my spoiler discussion of Volume 11. If there are some points that you guys would still like to address that I didn't cover, like what were your favorite parts of the novel itself? What did you think about Demeter possibly working with Enyo? I don't think she's actually Enyo itself, himself, herself, whoever, what gender Enyo is supposed to be, but I think Demeter is very suspicious and possibly working with Enyo based on the clues that we found in Volume 11 and linking it to something said in Volume 1. So very curious on that, like what are your guys' theories? What are your favorite character moments in this? Were you disappointed by this novel? Are you very much looking forward to Volume 12 like I am now? Please, June, please don't delay it, Yen Press, like you did with the main series, but I'm very positive that they'll do a good job with the translation here as far as timing, because Sword Oratoria like never really gets delays, and if it does, it's like by a week or two, and nothing like what 14 was of the main series. 4 whole months. But again, June 23rd, Sword Oratoria, Volume 12. Mark that date down. Hopefully it's not delayed. If you want to see more Danmachi content, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, or join my Discord, and as always, continue enjoying your time venturing on Ario and the dungeon. This is Lauren, your guild advisor, signing out.
"まっすぐな翼